Hi, I'm Lou Rosalia, and this is Crew Call. Is it the right tool for the job or is it the right skill for the job? That's what we're going to dive into and figure out today on Crew Call. Hey guys, everybody
Hello.
ready?
Hello.
Everybody ready? You all skilled up?
That really woke me up. It's like,
Yeah,
hey.
really
All
got me
right.
going.
Yeah,
Whoa.
I'm so tired today that I had to get myself going. So,
All
uh,
right.
we're going to talk about skills. I listened to a podcast over this weekend, and they were talking about having the right tools. That led me into thinking about skills. And they're like, if you've got the tools for this job and it's the latest of the tools, you can be able to do this, that, and the other thing. And then I thought to myself, you know what? Even with great tools, if you don't know how to use them and you don't have the skills for them, what good are they going to do you? So, with that in mind, Joe, let's kick it off. I've heard you say many times when you're hiring people, it's not about what equipment they can run, but it's more about the softer skills of their attitude, their aptitude, how they get along. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, because you can learn how to operate something,
Hmm.
and then that something becomes obsolete,
Right,
or that something is inappropriate for what you need it to do. And you
right,
could be the best at it, but if it's not, you don't need that, then it's not going to be that important. What's more important is that you have skills that you can learn and apply to a lot of different things. Um, and it's the different. I mean, there's so many. There's experts and finesse in one particular thing that's very, very important. But again, if it's so singular and so narrowed, you're going to get yourself in trouble. So it's not just operating one particular thing; it's understanding the nuance of the whole subject matter.
yeah. You know, I don't know why I'm thinking about this, but have you guys seen? You know Jeremy Clarkson? You know who I'm talking about? The big guy on that show with it's the English show where they take the cars and they drive around. I forgot what the heck it was, but anyway, it's called Clarkson's
It,
Farm. What?
no,
Somebody
nothing.
had. Oh, okay. Sorry, nobody had the name. I, totally unprepared. But anyway, Jeremy Clarkson during COVID they couldn't do the show anymore, so he owns this giant piece of land, 10,000 acres in England that he decided to farm. So he went out and talking about skills and tools. So he's highly skilled at being a driver, right? And they said, Jeremy, you got to go out and you got to get yourself some farm equipment. So the first thing he does, and he goes to the local tractor thing, and they have these little putt putt tractors. He says, "No, this is no good." So he goes to Germany and he buys a Lamborghini tractor. Now, do you guys know Lamborghini started as a tractor company,
How
right?
fast does
Yeah,
that go?
it was crazy. This thing was giant. It was the most beautiful tractor. You see him get in there, and he doesn't even know. It was like a 747 cockpit. Couldn't even apply all the skills he had to figuring out how to run this tractor. But I don't know. I digress. I don't know if that made any sense at all, but I had a hell of a time telling you the story.
The world's fastest farmer.
Exactly. Exactly. Anyway, Frank, speaking about equipment and diverse stuff, you obviously operate a wide range of gear. If somebody gives you a piece of gear that's as kind of on the older side, do you think that's a free pass to give them lesser quality work or an excuse if something doesn't turn out the way you would want it?
No, not at all. Because I mean, they're depending on who's giving it to you,
Hmm.
like they're not gonna. I mean, for the most part, they're not gonna know that it's definitely maybe it's inferior to something or outdated or whatever. They're just gonna expect that they hired you for a reason, and they're gonna expect your the same thing that you always put out to be
Right.
put out in this project, or whatever that show is.
Hmm.
Um, so no, I mean you kind of just got to work with what you have, and it's not can kind of make can kind of figure out anything like that. You know, whether it's an older jib, you know, like a really old one that has its little corks or can't really support a certain weight of camera or something, whatever the limitations of that is. You know, you kind of just work with it, or if you're in a certain space that, you know, that not even lesser equipment, but if you're in a certain space that's very limiting, which happens a lot, I mean, you just got to figure ways around it. I mean, that's kind of our whole industry.
Is that follow-up question? Is that something that amps you up? Do you dig those kind of challenges? Like, oh man, this is weird, but I'm going to figure this out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the nature of who I am, I guess. I mean, last night I moved my entire room around at 11 p.m. last night when I got back from work, and I measured originally the night before when I was thinking about how to lay it out, and I actually drew out exactly how I was going to lay the whole thing out. And then last night I got home and started moving stuff around. Some of the things weren't fitting where I wanted them to be, so I had to kind of just figure out other little things, or move this thing this way, or turn this that way. I don't know. I don't know how that translates to that, but just having like a challenge and not, instead of giving up and being, you know what, I'm just going to leave it the way it was. It was like, no, now I already started and I'm going to finish this and make it look good somehow.
I love this show because we're all over the place and it's just great. Speaking of all over the place, I want to focus on just one place, one night at one time, which is December 31st. Gloz, I saw your interview on working New Year's Eve for the CNN show, and you talked about having a different Steadicam configuration than you were used to. Is that common? Can they like, is it like a rider for rock bands, only the white M&Ms? I only work with this Steadicam. How does that play out?
No, there's a lot of different models of Steadicam. The things that change are the gear you get from the production truck, the truck that's on site. You get a camera in a different configuration. You get a camera with a matte box on the front of it. You get a camera with an RF box on the transmitter on the back of it. You know, you get different pieces you need to add to the Steadicam, but it's always the same Steadicam itself. But what changes is the balance, you know. So I'm used to, I can pretty much hop on any model of Steadicam and be perfectly comfortable because they all are the same. The only things that change are how much weight they can handle, or you know, a difference in hardware, you know, functionality. So yeah, gear that you get handed, I usually don't have any say in what I need on the camera, but I do have say in what I don't need on my system. So if they're asking me to power the camera off the camera, I can say no to that, you know, just because that having an extra battery on top will throw my balance off. You know, if they ask me to put an RF on the bottom as opposed to the top, that's what I have a say on, but I'd still have to use that. So the configuration and the actual pieces of gear that I have on will change, but the operation is always the same. It's always the same movements. It's always the same thing. You might have a 70-pound rig on one day. You might have a 30-pound rig on the next day. It just depends on what camera you're using and what gear's on that camera.
This is funny because we had 2 social media posts today on FerroCity that are directly in line with stuff you're working on. One was with the food
Styler.
Thank you, food stylist. I couldn't think of it. The second post was a girl in high heels running a Steadicam. Talk about
that was actually me in a dress. Yeah.
Excellent.
It's New Year's Eve. You got to dress up.
It was New Year's Eve. I had to look good. Exactly.
There you go. Joe, I want to ask you.
I have not worn heels. Oh, you know what? That's a lie.
But you have worn
absolutely
dress.
a lie. 'Cause in the 70s,
Go ahead.
platform shoes,
Yep.
I wore every gig I ever played. I had a set of platform shoes on, whether they were boots or whatever. So I retract my statement. I have worn heels, and I've worn them very stylish.
Nice.
Probably.
I think you could pull it off. You look
I
good.
did.
Totally. Okay, now I want to go back. I want to go back to something I've heard you say hundreds of times. That has nothing to do with heels. You always say it's not the tools or the equipment that makes the difference. It's the knowledge and the knowing how to use it. It sounds like a simple statement, but I know there's a lot more to it than that. Why don't you explain a little further?
That's a complicated and very intelligent statement that I don't think I would have said that way. Because I'm trying to figure out how to simplify that, because I'm a simplified guy. Say it again.
Joe, I've heard you say hundreds of times. I'm reading it exactly from my own notes. Heard you say hundreds of times. It's not the tools or the equipment that makes the difference. It's knowing how to use it. Can you explain that?
Yes, I can explain that.
Please do.
If you have, the most complicated piece of equipment or a piece of equipment that's extremely sophisticated and you don't know how to use it or you're lost on it, it doesn't matter how good it is. Your analogy was spot on before.
My Lamborghini tractor.
If you have a Lamborghini tractor and you get in it and you don't know where the levers are, it's useless. It might as well just be a hunk of metal. And I'll give you a very practical one. Not too long ago, we did a show, and our A1 got sick right before we went on the air, a couple of days before, not right before. And so I had to scramble to find an A1. Everybody happened to be sick. It was still during the rise of whatever that variant is called. We got one of the guys that I use that's a music engineer. And as we've talked about, they're the same, but they're different.
Right.
They both work on mixing consoles. They both have that, but it's a very different gig. But he was willing to step up and give it a shot. This is a live show. He stepped up, gave it a shot, but it took him almost 3-4 hours before to figure out where all the buttons were, the critical buttons, and how everything patched together and how everything went. So if he didn't have those skills, it doesn't matter that board is a very sophisticated broadcast audio board. It was his ability to adapt to the board. The board was never going to adapt to him.
Yeah.
So that's a perfect example of having the skills embedded in you and then being able to translate it to something else.
Which is the perfect segue, thank you very much, for my question for Frank. And Frank, you are a renowned specialty camera operator. And in specialty camera operators in robotics, that means there's a lot of different stuff that you have to learn how to use and know. Do you think people seek you out because you know how to use that stuff, obviously, or is it more that you can adapt to any kind of curveballs they may throw you, like they did putting Gloss in high heels with a steadicam on New Year's Eve?
That was tough.
So the question is it the fact that you actually know how to run all these things, or is it that in addition to the fact that even if you didn't, you would be able to figure that crap out quick?
I would say, both are definitely extremely important to know how to use gear, but I would almost say that the second half is even more important. Like not even necessarily adapting to like the equipment, but adapting to situations or stuff that's happening. Like you said, it's like a lot of the stuff, most of the stuff I do is live, and like kind of under the gun to get things working and like show ready. And there's always stuff that goes wrong, and obstacles that you have to get around, or see some type of situation that you can fix a piece of gear or anything like that. There's always curveballs, as you put it, on any show. So I would think that's definitely a big attribute of mine, which I would think a lot of people that's why I would get hired and brought back, because they trust me that I can represent them and get something done no matter, and I don't need to call them 100 times during the actual show.
Yeah.
That okay, I sent him out, I can just leave him alone and he'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And then, then you talk to him after and you go return the gear, and then you're like, oh yeah, this crazy stuff happened. And you're like, oh yeah, like that always. It's like, oh yeah, well you got around it. That was good. Everything was good. It's like, yeah, okay, cool. I'll call you when the next one's up. Like,
yeah. And that supports the first question we asked, and Joe said it's not so much what you can bring to the table in terms of operating stuff. He hires, and if I'm wrong, correct me, Joe, on aptitude and attitude. And I think that's really what this thing boils down to.
And I would think you would get put into two different categories. Sorry to just jump back in, but like, because then somebody that say that is hiring other operators to let's just pick jib because it's somewhat simple. you know, somebody might hire me for a certain thing that's a little more complicated. Yeah, it's building a jib and doing that, but the actual setting, and there could be a lot more things that goes wrong or challenges, or just something that you have to adapt to, where something else is like, hey, can you fill in for me? Like the jibs could already be built, or it's just, you know, like a simple show that's like, they know that it's easy. And, you know, I would think that somebody hiring just knows, okay, this is the limitations of that person, or this is, you know, the skill set of that guy.
Excellent. I'm watching Gloss because he disappeared off the screen, and I was going to ask him a question, waiting for him to come back. Welcome back.
He might not have disappeared off the screen in post-production. No one would have even known that.
I know. But today's show is about that. It's about sidetracking. Gloss,
Okay.
speaking about sidetracking, do you find with urban visuals that your clients get caught up in any of the minutia of, do you know this? Do you know how to run that? Are you going to use this app on my project? Or do you think they're more concerned with, put all that aside, I like you, I like your ideas, tell me about the end result?
I don't think the client. Well, number one, I bet you, going back to the high heels thing, I bet you all I can run a Steadicam in high heels, and I'll take that as a challenge to do that one day. But
Fine.
but
why is he always going back to this?
I don't want to wear them, but I just want to prove to you that I can do it. Maybe I do want to wear them a little bit.
No, nobody was saying that you couldn't, though.
I just really want to put high heels on.
It sounds like you just want to wear high heels.
Maybe I do, Frank. I don't know. Maybe it's been a lifelong dream of mine.
Yeah.
But no, Lou, I think that our clients are, in terms of gear and apps and things like that, they're really more focused on us having the capability of capturing their vision, of getting to the final product. I don't think they really care about how we get there. In terms of being able to operate gear and owning gear, I think it's better to show up with an arsenal of equipment to a job, just so you can kind of show your grand scale and like your diversity, and that you have all this equipment that you can use. But if, you know, I could show up to a job with eight Pelican cases and use one camera and probably achieve, you know, the same result as if I had, you know, another piece of gear. So to wrap it up, I think our clients, when they come to us with an idea, they're not really concerned about, you know, how much money we spend on gear or what we have or our tools. It's more about our knowledge and experience and, you know, our past work, and knowing and having the confidence in us to be able to achieve their vision. So yeah, I don't think it's so much them, you know, dictating what we use, as long as we get to that final product.
You get it done. Joe, I want to talk about renting, like when you rent time I'm going to use a recording studio because I saw a great show with Dave Grohl, who hunted down this old Neve mixing board. And it was just a really great documentary. I wish I remembered. I think it was Netflix. But anyway, when you're renting a recording studio or broadcast studio or anything like that, in your experience, what's more important, having the latest technology or having an operator who can take some of the older technology and really push it to unbelievable results?
It kind of plays off of what Glaz was saying, and it's funny because it's exactly the opposite. In recording studios, one of the things that killed all of us who owned recording studios back in the day, and we were very competitive with each other, was you'd have producers, record labels, musicians who they just left this and they had this cool SSL concert, and then they came over here and, well, how come you don't have that? And I need this toy and I need that toy, and you would get killed, even though you could just say, hey, don't worry about it, I can do this with this. Tell me what your end game is, as Glaz was illustrating. But in that world, in my world back then, it wasn't that. It was, you need to have that console. So you'd have to go out and rent it, or you'd have to get a rack of toys for them to have. And half the time you didn't even use it, but they came in and they wanted to see it because so-and-so just cut their album and they had these preamps and I want those preamps. And yeah, it's just it's a big pain in the ass dealing with people who don't know why, but have the strength to say, I want.
Yeah.
And that's the end of the game. If you don't have it, you don't get the gig.
And it's funny because it's actually way more impressive the other way.
Yeah.
If they came out of somewhere with all this high end gear and whatever, and then they come to a different studio that doesn't have that, and then you can still get the exact same result, or if not better, then they like it. That means and it's only going to be impressive to the people that understand the gear.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's across the board in any type of thing that we do. Music, television, sports, anything like that.
Yeah,
Frank,
and that's what and that ends. I'm sorry, Lou, but that ends up happening is you when you get the opportunity to show them, but there's a hierarchy that they're responsible to, and I get it, I understand that. So if I came to your studio and the A&R guy or whoever at the label said, "Well, how come you didn't use this?" And well, he didn't have it. Well, why did you go there? Because now listen, it sounds like shit. And even if it's great, they're still going to say, but he must have used these preamps. And you didn't. So it's really, there's so much politics that ties into that, especially in the recording world, because it's buzzwords. Kind of in television, technology fades off into the technologist world. But on the other, although, now, you know what? Let me correct myself. Because I've been on plenty of jobs where they're like, well, we need, and Glass can attest, we need a steadicam, or I want to have a jib here. And, they're both going to tell you it's an inappropriate piece of equipment to use here. I don't care. I want it.
Yeah.
All right. Then you have to just back off and go, okay.
Yeah.
And then,
all right, well, we paid for it, so we're going to make sure it gets used, even if it has nothing to do with anything that you actually need.
You're paying
Exactly.
for it.
And then again, it goes back to the other question you asked, Lou, is like, if you get handed a piece of equipment that isn't appropriate for what you're doing, doesn't matter. You're still expected as the operator to deliver, even though it's wrong.
So speaking about delivering, Frank, how hard is it for you to learn new technology? And second part of the question is how do you go about it?
I think I learn things fairly quickly, but I need to touch it and mess around with it. I need somebody that I know that knows the equipment to be able to ask questions, or if I watch them set it up a couple times, or if they go through it with me and set it up. I mean, that's how I learned everything that I know, like how to build a steadicam, how to build robos, how to, build a jib, all this different stuff. I need to be able to ask somebody and have my hands on it.
So I have a follow-up question to that, because a lot of the stuff I know you're working on or work with is it is new and cutting edge. So there's not like an old manual from Japan written really in bad English, put this here, look for this part there. So I guess it's got to be that way, right? I mean, they don't hand you here's the latest invention we have, and here's your assembly guide, IKEA style.
No, there's no, and it's funny because I've looked like the early on days when I was first learning, like I was a jib assist, a jib tech, which is helping the actual operator build, and it was Chuck. And now for 2 years, I probably was apprenticing, I guess, with him is what you would call it. And just learning how to build it, but I was his assistant. But I made sure that I was paying attention enough where, say he couldn't get there and I had the gear and I needed to start building, I got to a point where I was comfortable enough to be able to build on my own. And I was already operating before that. So that, to me, that was the easier part. The more fun and challenging part was putting the entire thing together and making sure it worked.
Yeah, of course.
And then you look at it at the end and you're like, holy shit, I just built that thing, and now I get to use that toy that I just put together. I mean, it's like getting something on Christmas morning. You rip through the instructions, don't read them, you figure out how to put it together, and then you get to play with it.
And that's a big point of contention, like the instruction people, Joe, versus the non-instruction people. Like, I got to read this stuff. So that's important. I got to read it all, make sure it's all there, and then I go to work on it. But anyway, that's another argument for another day. Gloss, I have a follow-up question before my real question, which is my final question. The follow-up question is...
anything.
Who taught you how to put all that Steadicam gear on? Like, how did you, what's your first day of, okay.
My first day was very awkward because my first day was in the studio put the vest on, and we'll just see what happens, pretty much. It was, hey, go out there. I'm going to show you how to do it. You're going to try, and you're going to see if you like it first. So yeah, I was taught by a handful of people. I didn't really grasp and understand the why to the Steadicam until I got formally trained by Tiffin and Steadicam. There was a joint class in Brooklyn that I took that it was a week long, and every day we started from the beginning and went through every nuance of the Steadicam. But that happened after a year and like a couple months of me actually informally training in the studio, either on my own after a few months or with a mentor, somebody who was proficient in the Steadicam. So yeah, it started with putting the vest on, why the vest is on you, started with the straps, how to strap everything in, how tight you wanted the vest. Then it moved on to how to stand, how to attach the arm, eventually how to dance into the Steadicam to get it to, come in, fall back into your body and then stay still. It's so many things. And it took me a long time to answer your question. It took me a year and over a year to just learn, So
Yeah.
it's a specialty skill, as a lot of what we do is, and it just took time and practice and repetitiveness to get it down. So it was a lot went into it. It was definitely a journey for sure.
Thank you for your follow up to the follow up. And now for the final question is, would you say your acquired skills that you had build off each other, or do you think each one is very unique and in a silo on its own?
So I guess what I do is I get two different kind of things. I work in the studio, and then I work for myself in creating videos for clients at Urban Visuals. So I think like all the skills I've acquired, editing, Steadicam, and anything that I've picked up over the years, learned from Joe, learned from Ferro, learned from coworkers, all those, a lot of them were specific skills on their own. And then with Urban Visuals, I kind of was able to take all of them and use all of them efficiently in business, in dealing with clients, in shooting projects. And then on the other side of that, my Steadicam is such a specific skill that where I go to a studio and they tell me I'm doing Steadicam, that's really all I need to worry about. And that's my specialty. That's my specialty. It's what I do, so
Right.
That's what I'm there to do. That's what I'm there to operate. All this other skills that I picked up over the years kind of played off each other. I think that's what you asked. So
That is exactly what I asked.
so yeah, I guess both ways to answer your question.
In summation, we opened up our discussion to figure out if it was the tool or the skill. I have been keeping a secret tally of how many times we used tool versus skill, and skill wins.
Right.
Every time.
By far. Everybody agree? Anybody want to argue that
Lou,
one?
you got 30 seconds for a follow-up story to Frank's?
Go.
Okay, so the first jib Frank and I ever pulled together was we were going to the Super Bowl. Frank had been doing jib in the studio that was built, and it was always there, and he became a good operator. But now we were traveling, and we rented a jib that came in cases, in pieces. And the company we rented for had really no idea how to put it together.
This is great.
So we were at the Super Bowl for a week. We had to do programming, and Frank and I sat there and opened it up, and Lou, you'll appreciate it. I used my Harley mentality of wrenching, because I looked at pieces and the two of us are looking there and we're looking going, okay, well, if you look at the picture, this connects to here. And Frank would say, no, that goes to here. Well, okay. And we would start piecing, where does this go? This piece might fit into here.
Yep.
And then, oh, you know what? We did it wrong. We took it all apart and we put it all back together. And then eventually we built the jib.
Yeah.
And it was, right?
Yeah, and the one thing that I'll cap that off, because it's on that, and it goes back to Lou, what you were asking before about why people would hire me to be able to dance around challenges and all that kind of stuff. In that specific thing, after we had it built, we didn't have enough. You have to counterweight the actual arm. So like I had like 50-pound weights that counteracted or was counteracting the weight on my side, but it was like somewhere in the middle of, I basically needed like 8.5 pounds or something like that, some weird kind of number. And I didn't have those weights. There was nowhere to really go buy them. So I filled up I was like, all right, well, like I just need weight on this side. And there's a weight bar where those that go on.
Right.
So I took a backpack, filled it with a bunch of little water bottles and put it on there. And then, like, if it was coming back too far, I was opening the water and I was pouring some of it out and putting the bottle back in. And then once I was pouring it out and whatever, got it balanced. And that's I have a picture somewhere of that
We have to find
specific
that.
thing with a backpack of water hanging on the back of it.
That's got to be a great picture. It reminds me of those travel weights the flight attendants have. They're like balloon bag type thing that they fill with water, so you can pack it flat, and that's before they had gyms in hotels.
That's why I can never get a water on a flight. Huh?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's okay. It doesn't matter. That's today's theme show.
Okay.
Next week we will have a real show with real, concise, tight stuff. I promise. Guys, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Great advice today for everyone in between the nonsense. We appreciate our audience, and I appreciate you guys as my friends, partners in crime, and brain trust. See ya.
See ya.
Ciao.